of year with exams and the hurricane and it's election day. But we really appreciate the attendance from our keynote speaker to the students and staff and all of our panel session leaders. So I just want to remind you all how lucky we are to be at Villanova and a school where the Clay Center and a society like the Women in Business Society can put together a conference like this. We have really excellent professionals coming in tonight to send some inspiring messages, and I hope you're able to take advantage of learning from them and networking. This conference is designed to be really open and honest, so when you go into a breakout session, please ask a lot of questions because the professional women are here for you and are devoting their time for your questions. So if you have a registration, we understand like seniors register tonight, so just politely step out, do what you have to do, and then you can come back in. It's not a big deal. So without further ado, we have some words from Dean Majidi.
Thanks. Usually you should hold your applause until you see what I have to say first, I would imagine, but I appreciate it. I don't look a gift applause in the mouth, as they say. So I wanted to welcome everyone. This is one of the best parts of being the dean is having the chance to welcome students and some of our esteemed alumni. And so I appreciate the fact that you're all here for this important event. I'd like to recognize the Women in Business Student Committee, Amira, who just spoke, Alyssa Wright, Emily Esposito, Lindsay Morrow, Marissa D'Ambrosio, and Sarah Choi, who worked very hard to plan this event, this conference. I'd also like to thank the VSB Clay Center, and in particular, Michelle Galloway. Is she in here? She's out there checking people in at the door. Michelle Galloway and Dr. Mary Kelly, who is the Women in Business Faculty Advisor, for their leadership and their guidance. Supporting women through their professional journey continues to be an important aspect of VSB educational experience. And while we've begun to see more examples of women in positions of influence and leadership, more work is needed. And I personally think that this is a tremendous opportunity for Villanova and the Villanova School of Business to differentiate itself in the market by becoming known for a place where women can thrive and become exceptional leaders. A recent report by the American Association of University Women found that women earn 77% of what their male counterparts make just 1 year out of college. So this statistic is contrary to another study conducted by Credit Suisse Research, which suggests that women in companies with women on their boards perform better in challenging markets than those with all male boards by as much as 26%. This research really is consistent with all diversity research that talks about the need for having varying viewpoints, particularly in strategic decision-making teams, which is an area of my research prior to becoming dean. Diversity in the workforce, not only in gender but also in ethnicity and educational background, is known to yield innovation and new ideas. So it's important that we offer and support diversity programs such as this and the women's initiatives we're working on. And there are several of these initiatives that Villanova is currently involved in and supporting, including the graduate and undergraduate women in business groups, as well as VSB Women in Business Advocacy Committee, which is a committee that I put together at the start of my deanship this year, which consists of VSB faculty and staff members. There's also a university-wide program called the Villanova Women's Executive Leadership Program, WeLeap, which is undertaking some interesting research and taking a different look at women and executive leadership. So it's my hope that these initiatives will enable all students to explore and understand issues that confront women in the business world generally and as business leaders, with the intent that when they join the business world themselves, they can be advocates for change. So to that extent, I'd like to welcome and thank Christine Dorfler, class of 97, our keynote speaker, for being with us this evening. I've had the pleasure of meeting Christine. It might have been even in my first or second week of being dean, but again, I would thank her for being here, and as well as other alumni that put forth effort on our behalf and on the behalf of our students, and particularly our women students. I think it's important and valuable work. I know you will enjoy hearing from Christine and learn more about her Villanova experience and how it led her to where she is today. So at this time, I'd like to turn the program over to Alyssa Wright, a member of the senior class at VSB, who will introduce our guest speaker.
Thank you, Dean Majidi. Our keynote speaker for this evening is Christine Dorfel of NBC Universal. Christine is the CFO and Senior Vice President of NBC-owned television stations. She has worked with NBC for nearly a decade, beginning her career with General Electric through their financial management program. She's a United States Army veteran who served for 4 years in Europe as a military intelligence officer and received her bachelor's degree in accounting from Villanova University. Please join me in welcoming Christine to the stage.
Thank you. Let me make sure this works. Hold on. Can you guys hear me? Hear me okay? Okay. So thank you, Alyssa. I really appreciate it, and thanks, Dean Majidi, for having me here tonight. It's a tremendous honor to be here. I really, when Alyssa told me about this evening, I was completely flattered and honored, and I thought, really, you want me to come talk? I don't know what I have to say, but hopefully I'll share some thoughts with you. And I kind of bounce around some random topics. I have a few pages that I wanted to share with you, and by all means, feel free to stop with questions, and hopefully we'll leave some time at the end for questions as well. So if you don't, do you mind? Okay, thanks so much. I was at a CFO conference last year, and there was a woman who spoke, and she said, you should always be able to describe yourself in 7 words or less. And so I thought I'd take the opportunity tonight when I'm talking to you to try to describe myself in 7 words or less. So I'm a hardworking mom. I have 3 kids under 8, and trying to seek challenges, new challenges, different challenges, growth opportunities, but also trying to stay balanced and trying to keep the things that are important to me in life in balance. And I think that's one of the most important things and lessons you can learn throughout your career. My career, Alyssa, kind of spoke to this a little bit. I graduated from Villanova in 1997. I started with General Electric in 2001. In between, I was commissioned as a second lieutenant in the U.S. Army. I did ROTC while I was here on campus at Villanova. I had a tremendous experience with the ROTC program. Definitely kept me hopping, trying to balance ROTC. I also played lacrosse when I was here at Villanova, so I was definitely in good shape during the 4 years here. I can't speak that I'm in such good shape now, but I definitely was during my 4 years here. But I was fortunate to be hired by General Electric into their junior officer leadership program, which was a program transitioning military officers into kind of the workforce and trying to transition those leadership skill sets into a more corporate environment in 2001. So I spent 2 years on that program, and then in 2003, I through a networking event, I met a woman who worked at NBC, and she said, hey, I have this great job in 30 Rock working in our corporate finance group, and I thought, here I come. Can't wait. So I started in New York at NBC in 2003. In 2004, NBC acquired Universal, and that came with a couple of cable channels that you may be familiar with, the USA Network and the Sci-Fi Channel. So I took an opportunity to work with that newly acquired business, and I spent a few years working with the USA Network and the Sci-Fi Channel in a few different roles. In 2008, I started with NBC4 New York, which is the local news station in New York for any of you who are from the area, WNBC New York. And I spent a few years there, and that was a really, and I'll talk a little bit more about this, but that was a really, probably the area in my career where I learned the most, because it was a challenging time from an economy standpoint. I started in the late 2008, in the fourth quarter of 2008, we hit a recession, the ad market went down, and we had to cut costs by 30% in my business. And so that was a real challenge and a learning opportunity for me, but probably the year or 2 years in my career where I definitely learned the most. And then in 2011, NBC sold the controlling stake, or General Electric sold the controlling stake in NBC. Comcast became our parent company. And later that year, I had the opportunity to be named CFO of the NBC-owned television stations group, which I'll talk a little bit about as well. So that's been kind of my path, as Alyssa talked about a little bit, since I graduated from Villanova in '97. One of the things Alyssa asked me to talk about a little bit was what Villanova meant to me. Obviously you guys are living this experience, and I would say enjoy every day of it, because you'll always remember it, I think, as a wonderful time in your life. What it meant for me, it kind of, I mentioned that I did ROTC and I played lacrosse at Villanova, and I think, trying to balance academics with those things, and I'm sure that you are involved a lot in your experience here, it teaches you to be a self-starter. It teaches you that, things don't kind of fall in your lap, you kind of have to go out and get them. And so that was one of the things I learned, I think, that has helped me subsequent to my graduating. Evolution, I was definitely a different person when I graduated from Villanova than I was when I started. I think, obviously 4 years later, it's 4 years full of wonderful experiences and new challenges and learnings, but definitely evolution was something that I think, a tremendous amount of evolution in those 4 years, and certainly something that I carried with me. Community, definitely a strong sense of community. I'm sure the juniors and seniors here feel that especially well. But that sense of community, I think, is something that shouldn't leave when you leave Villanova. You should carry that community with you forward. You should build that network and kind of continue to maintain those relationships that you've developed here. And then I think I would also say you should look for community in the job that you choose and in the industry that you choose. Even in a big corporation, you can find sense of community and sense of purpose and a feeling that you get that you like. And so I think that's kind of important. That's stuck with me through the years. Passion. I think Villanovans are passionate people and spirited people by nature. And I think that's a skill set and kind of an attribute that is very important in your career. I think no matter where you are, no matter what you're doing, if you can show that you're passionate about whether it's the product that you're with or the company that you work for, or the industry that you're in, I think that differentiates you from other people, and I think that's really important. And then giving. I think a sense of giving is something that I'm sure all of you feel here in the Villanova community, and certainly that's something that stayed with me through various experiences in my career as well. What I do now, so Alyssa kind of talked to this, I'm the CFO of the NBC-owned television stations. We own 10 stations across the country, 7 of the top 10 markets. We have about 2,300 employees and about 45 finance employees who are all over the country. We're a local news business, so Philadelphia was a little bit impacted by Hurricane Sandy last week, so there was a lot of news coverage on. That's what I do. I support the financials for that local news business. That's not only crucial in providing the community with key information, but also generates a lot of revenue from advertising. We're about $1 billion business, and as I mentioned before, our new owner, as of about a year and a half, is Comcast. So NBC Universal, just I know some of you are familiar with the business, but it's not just the NBC television network. It's actually 4 major segments. We're broken into cable, broadcast, film, and actually theme parks as well. So this is a very different business than it was 10 years ago. 10 years ago, in the days of Seinfeld and Friends and ER, it was kind of primarily a broadcast network. Through subsequent acquisition of Universal and then combining with Comcast, there are a tremendous amount of assets now, but especially on the cable side. You can see that NBC owns everything from news and information networks like CNBC and MSNBC to entertainment networks like USA, Sci-Fi, Bravo, and now with the Comcast contributed assets, we own E, Style, Sprout, Oxygen, and a few others. Sorry, can you go back? Thanks. So the broadcast network side of that is the NBC product that you all are familiar with, NBC News, Sports, and Telemundo. We actually have a Spanish language network and station group as well. Film, Universal Pictures is our film entity, and parks, the Universal Parks in Orlando and Hollywood as well. So it's a big media company at this point, and it competes with the likes of Disney and Viacom. That's primarily our competitive set. Okay, so just a little bit about the industry that I'm in. If you think about how you consume media today, I'm sure it's very different than how your parents consume media and how their parents consume media. I look at the way I consume media, and it's definitely different than the way my 8-year-old son consumes media. And I'm sure that 10 years from now, he'll be consuming media in a very different way than he does today. And so, part of the reason I really enjoy working in the media industry is that it's absolutely rapidly changing, and you can see the challenge that presents from trying to monetize, advertising revenue, and from going from sort of a primary television screen in the 50s and 60s to all of the devices and all of the screens that we use today to consume, media is a challenge and something that kind of keeps us on our toes all the time. Why I love what I do. And I think, as you guys think about whether you're a freshman or sophomore or junior and senior, really sort of starting to think about what you want to do post-graduation, I think you really have to think about what you're passionate about and what you're excited about and, where your interest lies. When I started with General Electric in 2001, I was working in a manufacturing plant in Schenectady, New York, and our product was steam turbines. And I would sit in these meetings with engineers, and it was like they were speaking French to me because I had no idea what they were saying. And, a great industry and perhaps a fit for someone, not necessarily a fit for me. When I started working at NBC in 2003, I felt much more a part of the product, much more connected to the product. And I think, that sort of connection and passion and sort of ability to be a business partner is what you should think about as you think about the industry you want to work in, as you think about the job you want to pursue. But no 2 days the same, changing business model. We talked about how rapidly changing the media industry is. I love that I can see the product. You literally turn on a TV set and you can see the product. I think that certainly makes it much more tangible in terms of how you can influence the business and make a difference. Influence the product. I think as you think about what you want to do, I think you always want to make sure that you have an opinion, that your opinion is heard with whom you're working, with your boss, and that you're working for someone who values your opinion and who values the influence that you may have over it. Business partner, not numbers geek. I was an accounting major here at Villanova. I never wanted to be a numbers geek, and so I think I'm in an industry and in a job where I can be a business partner and not just a numbers geek. And then my kids know more than me. I talked about this. My 3-year-old daughter can use an iPad better than me, and so it's fun to work in an industry that's changing such that younger generation knows more than my generation about what the future of my industry holds in terms of how behavior is going to change and how people will consume media going forward. A few things that I've learned, and hopefully I have a long way to go, but a few things that I've learned along the way. One is that change is inevitable. My best example of this is, I've taken a job in the past working for someone, and I've said, geez, this is the person I have to work for, must work for this person. They hire me, I take the job, 2 months later they get promoted into a new job. Oh geez, that's terrible, the world is falling apart. And change is inevitable. You can have a plan, but you have to be prepared to throw that plan out sometimes and kind of just embrace the opportunity that's in front of you. And I would say learn from the good and the bad. I've worked for good managers and I've worked for really bad managers, and I think taking the opportunity to not dwell on how bad the situation is, but really taking the opportunity to say, you know what, I'm going to learn from this, and I'm going to learn what I don't want to do when I'm a manager, is really the approach that I think is best. Number 2, have a career plan, but don't be afraid to throw it out. I think as you look ahead and say, where do I want to be in 3 years or 5 years or 10 years, you may be able to script it out and write it out and say, this is the path I'm going to follow. But you never know what opportunities are going to present themselves to you. And I would say don't be afraid to kind of embrace the opportunity that's in front of you, even though it may not have been what you scripted back when you graduated from Villanova. You may think you're going to have a career in finance or accounting, and you may find out that marketing is really your passion and that you're very good at it, and someone may see that in you, and you may have an opportunity to present itself that's totally different than the major you graduated in. I work with a lot of CFOs who are engineering majors, and how, why, who knows? But I think you got to figure out what you're passionate about, and don't be afraid to kind of veer left or right off that career plan. The other thing I'd say is, you always think, or at least I always did when I was young in my career, that your career has to go like this. And if you're not increasing your title and getting a promotion every single job you take, then you're doing something wrong. And the most valuable job I took in my career was a third parallel job. It was a lateral move. It wasn't a promotion in title. It wasn't really a promotion in pay. But it was a part of the business when I worked for NBC that was a little bit unscripted, a little bit Wild West, didn't really have a whole lot of financial control around it, and I learned more. I only worked in the job for 15 months, but I learned more in that 15 months than I ever had, and I remember going into the job saying, geez, this is a lateral move, and I'm not getting promoted, and this is a terrible job. And I would say it doesn't always have to go like this. Sometimes you might go like this or this or this, but you have to learn from those experiences along the way. Number 3, be someone who people want to be in the trenches with. My point here is that someone said this to me, so when you get to a certain point in your career, people are going to assume that you have a good skill set and strong skills. And they're going to want to interview you and find out if you're someone that they want to be sitting with at 11 o'clock at night, the night before a budget presentation, and someone they can tolerate at that time. And it's more about that sometimes than it is about the skill set you have. And obviously, you guys are here, which means you're motivated and you're eager and you're ambitious, and you're at Villanova, which means you're strong academically to begin with. So I would say be someone who people can tolerate late at night, and you roll up your sleeves and have a positive attitude, and who people want to be in the trenches with. Because I think you'll find that once you get to a certain point in your career, your bosses people who are hiring you are going to look for someone who they can kind of roll up their sleeves with. And when times are tough, or when you're working late, or when you've been through a really hard week, and they're going to want to find someone and hire someone who they can be with. Surround yourself, number 4, with diversity of thought and opinion. I've met some people who say, geez, I want to make sure that everyone who I work with kind of thinks like me and who has a similar background to me and a similar skill set. I think one of the really important lessons I've learned is that you're much better if you hire folks who have a similar background to you and who kind of think like you. You're not going to get any diversity of opinion. You're going to get the same perspective as you, which I've always found that the best people I've worked with and worked for and who have worked for me are folks who think completely differently than me, and who come to the table, and I may be thinking, geez, we're going to go this way, and they come at it from the completely different way. And maybe it's a right brain, left brain thing, I'm not sure, but I've always found that those are the most valuable people on my team and people that I work with. Number 5, number 5 probably should have been number 1, because this is one of the biggest things I've learned. The smartest people I know communicate clearly and simply. There are a lot of folks I know who overcomplicate things, I think, to sound smart. It's not smart. I think that you'll find in your careers, and I found that the best managers and the smartest folks I've worked with are the people who can deliver a simple, concise, clear, actionable message, so that there's no question, there's no overcomplication, you know exactly the direction you're going. And so I would encourage you, as you not only as you communicate, but also as you ask questions of the people you're with, whether it's in an internship and you're talking to your manager, I demand that sort of clear communication back to you. You may say, one of my favorite questions that people ask of me is, help me prioritize. You've just thrown 6 things at me, help me prioritize. And then I take a step back and I say, okay, what a great question. I've thrown 6 things at you, forget about 4, 5, and 6 and focus on 1, 2, and 3, but do them in the order of 3, 2, 1. And that's it's a simple way to say, okay, now I have a clear idea of what I'm doing and the order in which is most important to my boss. So I would say do it in, both in your academic career, but also in your internships and as you think about post-graduation, but also demand it of the people you work with. Go outside the lines, never stop learning. I work for a local news business. Whenever we hire a finance employee, one of the things I require of that finance employee is that their first month on the job, they go out in a truck with a local news camera crew. And they go out with a reporter, and they sit in the truck, and they go out on the scene of a story, whether it's at a city hall or a shooting or, well, we don't throw them into a shooting, but, so that they can understand the challenge of the business, and so that they can understand exactly what they're doing when they're behind a desk doing a spreadsheet and they have to, cut costs, maintenance costs on the truck. I want them to remember being in that truck and hoping that it doesn't break down when they're in the South Bronx. So, it really gives you that perspective on the product. So I would say go outside the lines. The other thing I ask my finance employees to do is to go on a sales call. Go out and talk to a client and listen to what the client is saying to you. Because it's so easy to sit back behind a desk, working in Excel, and put in a formula and grow revenue 10%. But when you go out and you talk to a client, and the client is pushing back and negotiating and haggling, and you find out that it's really not that easy when you're out in the field to try to sell your product at 10% more than you did the last quarter. So, I think all of those things that you may think, geez, I'm a finance employer, I'm an accountant, or I'm a business person, and I got to stay in my lane. And I would really encourage you to go outside the lane and really take the opportunity to know your product and to understand the challenges, so that you're not just sort of sitting behind a desk, making assumptions, that you're really understanding what's behind those assumptions. And then number 7, I talked about this a little bit at the beginning, stay balanced. I think some of the best people that I've worked for and work with are people who can, stay balanced in terms of not only work-life balance, whether you have a family or not, but also balance in terms of interests, who have interests outside of work, and who can kind of keep that balanced perspective on things. Work-life balance, I thought I'd put in a little plug for an NBC show. We could use the ratings help, if anyone, yeah. So work-life balance, number 1, I think it's not just for moms. I don't think it, I think for dads, work-life balance is important too. I think for folks with, who have interests outside of work, work-life balance is important. For folks who may have an elderly parent or, some sort of family concern, there's always a time in your career where you're going to need that balance, and it's not just a mom thing. So I've definitely learned a few things about work-life balance over the years, and I know this probably seems far away from you, but I know that it's as a woman in business, and as you think about your career, it's definitely sort of top of mind, and as you think about maybe what your 5-year or 10-year or 15-year plan is. My advice would be, don't expect perfection. It's never going to be perfect. There have been many days when I've gone to work with spit up and formula on my dress and things like that, and you just kind of have to roll with it. So don't expect it to be perfect. It never will be. It's always going to be a challenge, and you're always going to feel like you're torn in a few different directions. But I think if you can kind of keep perspective and stay balanced, that's the best approach. From a flexible work arrangement standpoint, or probably by the time you guys are ready to think about work-life balance, I'm sure that companies will be even further along than they are now in terms of offering flexible work arrangements. My only advice would be, as people have asked me and I've asked bosses for flexible work arrangements, you really need to earn it. It's nothing that anyone is entitled to. You need to prove that you're credible and can get the job done, and earn the respect and credibility of your boss and the people you work with, not only your boss but your team, because you want to respect their time as well. I've been in the position to both where people have asked me for flexible work arrangements and where I've asked bosses for flexible work arrangements. And you definitely are in a much better position when you can prove that you're credible and can get the work done and can deliver the product and can be available even if you're not at work. Don't be afraid to ask. I think many times, even as people have come to me or I've gone to different bosses, you say, geez, if I asked to work 2 days a week from home, my boss would never say yes to that. And I think my advice would be, don't be afraid to ask. You don't know. And even if the answer is no, you may work out a compromise that's suitable to you. Set boundaries and stick to them. I think this is very important from the standpoint of if you say, I'm going to work a 4-day work week. I'm going to get my job done Monday through Thursday, and then I'm not going to work on Fridays. And then you start showing up in the office on Fridays or taking calls on Fridays, people will just assume you're working on Fridays. So you really have to, I think, be very stringent and strong and stick to your boundaries, as well as kind of setting clear boundaries so that the people you work with know exactly when you're available and when you're not. And then pay it forward. As I've said, I've been in a position to ask for flexible work arrangements, and I've been in a position to approve them. And I think, you have to figure out what works best for your team and what works best for your business and your organization and your boss, but you also want to be open to flexible work arrangements, as your team may ask for them. Being a woman in business, be open-minded. The story that comes to mind with this is I was approving expense reports one day, and I came across an expense report for a whole spa day. And it was like the manicures and pedicures and massages, and I thought, what kind of legitimate business expense is this? This is crazy. So I called up the saleswoman and I said, what are you putting this expense report in front of me for? This is crazy. I'm not approving your spa expenses. And she said, listen. She said, would you approve the male salesperson who took the guy on a golf outing? And I said, well, yeah, he took a client on a golf outing. That's legitimate. He said, well, the woman who runs such and such advertising agency is, she wanted to go to the spa for the day, and that's how I entertained the client, and, we did business. Okay. So be open-minded. You tend to, or at least I tended to in that instance, think that was totally out of line. But, definitely as women sort of get involved in areas like sales, or which in my industry is predominantly male, you have to think a little bit outside the lines. Networking is crucial. Obviously, you're all here because you want to network. You're networking now. If you're a freshman, you're networking now. If you're a senior, you're certainly networking now. But it's crucial, and continue to do it. You never ever know a person you're going to meet, and when you might cross paths with that person again somewhere down the road. Like I said, when I was at General Electric, I met a woman through networking. She had a job, and 3 months later thought of me and called me for that job. So it's absolutely crucial, and do it as often and as much as you can. Be good to each other. Sometimes I think that it's tougher to work for women. We have higher expectations of ourselves. My advice would be good to each other, and create a better workplace for our kids. Obviously, we want to, as we think about how we change the environment around us, and it may seem difficult if you work in a big corporation, but you always want to constantly improve the workplace to make it better for our kids, both male and female. Still learning, another plug for an NBC show. It's no longer on. I'm still learning. I think you're always still learning, and if you're not, then something's wrong. Some things I still want to improve upon: leadership, constantly improving leadership, and how I can grow my team and make sure that they're in a position to replace me someday. Anticipating industry trends, trying to stay ahead of the curve, thinking about what our competition is doing. Recruiting for my replacement. I was just down at Comcast headquarters a couple of weeks ago, recruiting or interviewing candidates for one of their programs, and you always want to think about, geez, is this person going to be the next CFO of NBC Universal or the CFO of Comcast? You always want to recruit for your replacement and bring in the absolute best and brightest. Break down barriers to efficiency. I think for me this hits close to home because I've worked for the U.S. government, General Electric, and now NBC Universal, all big corporations. Big corporations come sometimes with bureaucracy and, matrices and lots of layers. And I think always being open to break down those barriers to efficiency is something I'm constantly trying to do and want to get better at. And then I think, as you think about whether you're in an internship or whether you're in your first job out of school, I think you always want to think about making your boss look good. You always think about what they're thinking. And what if my boss asked me for this analysis and I give them a 30-page spreadsheet, is that really what I would want if I were in their shoes, or how are they going to then communicate that to their boss? And so I always try to think about things from your boss's perspective and making them look good. Advice, talked a little bit about this, but networking, we talked about, get involved. I talked about a couple of examples that I ask of my employees in terms of really getting to know the product and, kind of going out into the field, whether it's with a sales team or whether it's with a camera crew, get involved, whether you're on campus. Here there's so many opportunities, obviously, that Villanova offers. That sort of diversity of experience counts. I can tell you that when I was at Comcast interviewing a couple of weeks ago, one of the things we talked about was that the folks we interviewed had so much diversity of experience in terms of what they were involved in, what they did during summers or time off, what they did in terms of both on-campus and off-campus activities, and that sort of diversity of experience definitely counts. Pursue your interests. I was just talking to someone about this prior to starting tonight. You really have to take your time and think about what you're passionate about and where you want to be. The money will follow. But if you find something that you really love, I think you have more longevity in your career than not. Be confident but humble. I can't tell you how many times I've interviewed folks coming out of school, and you say, geez, what are you looking for in your job? And they say, well, I really want to lead people and manage people. I want to manage a team. I say, well, you're just coming out of school. What do you know that you are able to teach people yet? So you want to be confident and certainly proud of the experiences that you've had here at Villanova, but you also want to be humble. You don't want to come to an interview with a 4-page resume, when you really haven't had a whole lot of work experience. Admit mistakes. Ask a ton of questions. I would give that advice to anybody, but especially junior folks. You're at a time in your career and in your life when you can ask a ton of questions. You're young, you're learning, so ask a ton of questions and always admit your mistakes. I think one of the mistakes I made early in my career was I would try to fix a mistake before my boss caught on to it. I'd say, geez, I made that mistake. Let me go do 10 things to try to fix it. You're much better off going in and saying, I screwed it up. I want you to know I'm going to fix it. So admit mistakes right away. Ask a ton of questions. That's a huge, and I think you can start that now. You can start that in your academic career. You can certainly start it with internships. Choose the people you're working with as much as the job. It's important to not only work for someone who you think is going to help you grow and who you think is going to help you learn, but also the people around you. We talked about Villanova and such a strong sense of community, and that's something you're used to. You want to find a corporate culture that offers a sense of community and a purpose that you're comfortable with and you can kind of embrace. So choose the people, choose the culture as much as you choose the job. And then I think finally it probably goes without saying, but be tenacious and hardworking. I think there are a couple of things that I've seen that differentiate people from others. I think one is hardworkingness, and two is attitude. Again, is this person going to have a positive attitude when 10 things have gone wrong and we've missed our number and our budget pages are late and we can't get anything done, and is this person going to just dwell in the depressing moment, or are they really going to have a positive attitude and be someone that's going to kind of lift spirits and get the job done? So I think those two things really differentiate you. And then finally, the one funny thing, I thought the book that Alyssa said to recommend, I chose Team of Rivals, which kind of seems silly because I'm at a women in business conference and the book is about all men, but it was written by a woman, and the reason I chose it, and I can't say that I finished it, it's 750 pages, so definitely take your time. But the reason I chose this book is really because it goes back to one of the things I talked about in terms of diversity of thought and opinion. And President Lincoln chose his cabinet members because they all came with a different perspective and different skill sets and different experiences than he had. And that made him a stronger leader and made him more successful. And I think there's a lot of learning in that in terms of surrounding yourself and being around people who bring that sort of diversity of thought and experience to the table. And that's the reason I chose the book, but I did think it was kind of ironic that it's all men. So that said, thank you again, Alyssa and Dean Majedi, for the opportunity to speak tonight. And I'd be happy to answer any questions.
One question, how would you describe your transition from an entry-level position to a managerial role? Because I know you have a lot of like director, managerial positions, so just what was that transition like, and what advice would you have?
Yeah, sure. I had a bit of a unique, sort of experience because I served 4 years in the military. And then I started in an entry-level position right after that with GE. And, I think that the entry-level position to me is really about building your skill set, learning the company, learning the culture, learning the industry, learning the acronyms. If you're like me and you've worked for, I went from working for the U.S. Army to then working for General Electric, and there were more acronyms than I can even count. So, that's part of learning a culture and learning the language and the lingo. And developing your analytic skills, learning how to work in sort of a corporate culture because it's very different than a college campus. And so I think that entry-level position is about that. I think the biggest transition from an entry-level position to then that sort of, in my career, is more of like a manager-director level. Two things. I think one is you're still a worker, and you're still a strong individual contributor with a lot of work to do, but you're also starting to manage people and teams. And for me and the folks on my team, I take that very, very seriously in terms of I think it's a huge responsibility for someone to manage a person and to help them grow and develop them and give them clear and consistent feedback and communicate clearly and effectively. And I think there's huge learning in that. So I think that's the biggest, challenge at that, maybe 5 to 7 years into your career is you're still doing a lot of work and contribution, but you're also starting to transition into that management area. Any other questions? No?
Well, thank you so much, Christine.
Yeah, no, thank you. Thank you so much for having me. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Christine, for speaking. So if you look in your folder, on your left side, you're going to find 2 sheets, which has hashtag Please with Math on it. So Villanova Women Business is participating in an awareness campaign hosted by CNN and 10 by 10 to spread the message that educating girls in developing nations will help change the world. So if you could fill out the sheet on what Girls Plus education means to you. Marissa in the front and I will go around during the networking session and take a picture of you and your sign, and we're going to upload it to their site and on Twitter. So that's just like a way to give back, but that'll be a really good idea. And so yeah, now we're going to break out in our breakout sessions. So if you look on the schedule, you're going to see, depending on which session you want to attend, it's either going to be in this room or in the back in the red there in the